Bill O'Reilly himself, host of the No Spin News, author of the coming book, Confronting Evil, Assessing the Worst of the Worst. More importantly for tonight's conversation, Killing Jesus, which debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller and remained there for 52 weeks. Your expertise there, invaluable on this evening. Mr. O'Reilly, good to see you. I'm trying to figure out what Joe Scarborough meant, which is sometimes a difficult try, but he said, and with Francis, many conservatives inside the church hated him for being Christ-like in that respect.
Well, it's just gibberish. Is anybody surprised? You know, it's a fascinating story because it's when theology and politics collide, or more focused, theology and public safety collide. And this is what I think people have got to think about. If every human being on earth were like Pope Francis, there would be peace on earth. Wouldn't have any crime. You wouldn't have anybody hurting other people if everybody was like Pope Francis. So he was an extraordinary human being, and he's got to be in heaven tonight. If he's not there, Leland, you and I have no shot. Neither does anybody else. He's a good, good man. 8 years ago, almost to the day, I met him. Brief conversation in Rome with him. But I was in his presence for about 2 hours, and I watched how he treated everyone that he came into contact with. It was very, very instructive for me as a journalist to watch how patient and kind the man was. Now, his philosophy was based out of his upbringing in Argentina. He practiced liberation theology, which means that the poor are oppressed by government and a capitalistic system. There's where Pope Francis went wrong. It's not the capitalistic system that oppresses the poor. It's the oligarchs and the corrupt people that he had to deal with in Buenos Aires. That was a military government. I was down there covering the Falklands War when he was the archbishop there. It was awful government, terrible government. They'd kill priests. They'd kill anybody. And Francis was raised in that kind of environment, the Peronists, where the people had nothing and all the power brokers had everything. So he developed this philosophy of life that the powerful and the wealthy are not looking out for the folks.
Okay.
There is something to that, but it's a very difficult thing. I never got a chance to interview the Pope, but my first question would have been, Your Holiness, I understand as a Catholic the theology of helping the marginalized, the poor, not demonizing them, not harming them. I understand. But when you say to the Trump administration, okay, don't build walls, build acceptance, which is pretty much what he said, do you not understand that if you don't have a wall and you don't have a law, that the country will be overrun and many, many more people will get hurt under the banner of being kind and good?
Okay.
I would have liked to have asked him that question.
Good question. I wonder if you would have remarked also that the Vatican has an awfully big wall surrounding it.
That's not fair, though.
Okay.
That's not fair. Look, the popes are in danger, and one of them was almost killed. So, of course, they're going to have security.
No, I'm not talking about security. I'm talking about the Vatican built huge walls.
That goes all the way back.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to knock down their historic walls?
No. I used it metaphorically. Let me get to. You said a lot of important things. I want to get through this.
Okay.
The whole idea of Pope Francis was to, in some way, liberalize the church, right? We went through a number of the things that he did. But at the same time, yes, you said when politics and theology collide, Gen Z turning to Christianity, overall, younger generations are more spiritually curious. Gen Zs are interested in learning more about Jesus, with younger cohorts leading the way in the growth of new commitments. You think about the Catholic Church moving to the right. It's unclear just how much influence American conservatives will yield in the global contest to select a new pope. Still, America is home to the world's fourth largest Catholic population, is a big source of wealth for the Vatican under financial strain. J.D. Vance was there yesterday. that is the future of the Catholic Church in America. How is that different than the future of the Catholic Church around the world?
Well, I don't generalize like that, and I think USA Today has no idea what it's talking about and hasn't had for quite some time. It's run by a very, very devoted
The last
left.
article was from the Wall Street Journal.
Right. Okay, but the one that caught my eye that you put on the screen was USA Today. The Wall Street Journal took Pope Francis to task for not standing up to Xi and the Chinese communists when they demanded that they have the right to appoint Catholic bishops. And it's just crazy because what was the Pope going to do? All right? He wanted to keep Catholics in China out of the gulags, so he had to do it. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that drives me crazy. If you look at Pope Francis, he wasn't really liberal in the political sense. He was trying to get as many people as possible to follow the tenets of Jesus, to be peaceful and kind, to be merciful. That's what he was trying to do. And he says he's not going to condemn gays or anybody else in the pursuit of that. But on the theological dogmatic questions like abortion, he was quite clear. He wasn't backing away. He wasn't trying to curry favor with the left. He was saying, you're killing a human being. That's what he said. Okay? Now, the question about Joe Biden is an excellent question. Biden is about as far away from Catholic theology as you could possibly get. And he uses his Catholicism as a showboat. Okay? And that offended me because you can't promote abortion as Biden did. He promoted it. The procedure, he promoted it. And go to church and stand there at the communion rail and go, okay. No, it's not okay. Francis didn't play that game. And I respected him for not playing it because that's what the left wanted. That's what the Pelosi's wanted. And so it's a very complicated matter. But this was a good man, I think, essentially. But I think he had a blind spot for the damage that was being done in the name of mercy. Think about that.
I wanted to get to what Scarborough said because, and Francis, conservatives, many conservatives inside the church hated him for being Christ-like in that respect. Is there, you're describing Pope Francis in a way I've never really heard you talk about someone in this glowing or positive of a light. Is there some parallel between Francis and Jesus?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I'm going to put Joe Scarborough aside because what he does is try to diminish and demean conservative people. We don't do that here. Jesus was much more pragmatic than Pope Francis. The Nazarene understood he couldn't go up against Augustus in Rome. He couldn't speak out against the horrible Roman governance that brutalized the people right in front of Jesus' eyes. He couldn't do that because if he did, he'd wind up like his cousin John the Baptist with his head cut off. And Jesus needed 2 years to formulate the Christian faith. He knew he needed it. The Sanhedrin tried to trap him, tried to get him to say things about Augustus and Rome that would get him killed. Like, what about paying taxes to Caesar? Give him a coin. Render to Caesar. Jesus outsmarted them all. Jesus did not advocate law breaking. He did not do that. He would not have done that had he been here today. He would not have said, okay, President Biden, it's fine you don't obey immigration law. It's fine you allow 14 million foreign nationals into your country unattended. That's fine. Jesus would not have said that. And that's what people should understand. There is a law. There is a public law and a spiritual law. Sometimes they collide. But Jesus, if you study what he did, and we did, that's the best book on the Nazarene ever written, in my opinion. I know I'm conceited, and that's a sin.
Slightly biased in that one.
It's a history
But that doesn't mean
book.
you're wrong.
Go ahead.
It doesn't mean you're wrong. I got one more question for you, and I want you to try to give it to me in a little bit of a concise answer because I'm stealing from other guests
Sure.
because I think this is important. There's been a switch in America of working class traditional value Americans from Democrat to Republican. Does the Catholic Church in America need to understand where its flock is in terms of values and followers as they pick the next pope?
There's no centrality of the American Catholic Church, none. The most brilliant of them is Bishop Barron in Minnesota with the Word on Fire movement. There's no leader of the American Catholic Church. There's a council of bishops, and they're wishy-washy, generally speaking. What happens is that working Americans, whether they're Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or Protestant, whatever, are fed up with the disintegration of our society because of far-left tenets. And that's what it is in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
But it's that way in all the churches.
Since you did that one quickly, let me give you one more, and then we'll leave it there.
Sure.
As someone, you texted me earlier today, and you said if you do not lead with the Pope, you're making a huge mistake. I did not grow up with any religion in my household of any real type. Don't participate in organized religion now. Why should the rest of America who is not Catholic care about this story?
Because it's morality. It's right and wrong. And I'm going to send you a copy of Killing Jesus, Leland. That's individual men.
Okay.
That's like saying, I'm going to leave America because Richard Nixon was a crook. Richard Nixon is in America, okay? The fundamentals of America are worth fighting for.
Agreed.
The Catholic religion, if you understand what Jesus put out there, is flawless in its dogma, in its theology. If everybody, as I said at the beginning of the interview, acted like Pope Francis, we'd have no problems.
That's what.
And those who don't engage in spirituality, in right and wrong, are abdicating their humanness. That's why I wrote Confronting Evil, coming out in September. You can't just sit it out. You don't have to believe, but you have to know what's being said.
That's a good point. No, that's reasonable, and I think high praise from you about who Pope Francis was and what we can all aspire to be. Bill, it's always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Leland.
Yes, sir. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.